Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is another set of feedback for an extra mile activity for students in my Standard 5 Creative Writing and ELA class. This topic would have been understanding electricity, the power behind everyday life. What do we mean by an extra mile activity? Well, an extra mile activity is for the student who is ambitious, who's already done their compulsory or mandatory homework, and who wants to go the extra mile because, as we always say in our class, the top of the mountain is very, very rarely crowded because most people do not go the extra mile. My name is Mrs. Crosby, and here is your feedback for this week's activity. So this week we are looking at a reading comprehension passage which is based on a non-fiction topic, and the topic this week is understanding the concept of electricity. Students were asked to read this passage here. You can feel free to pause the video or wait for me to read, and then you can answer these questions that students will be required to answer. A very short activity just to expose students to more written material, which is always a good idea. And of course, answering questions becomes easier when you have a lot of practice with that skill. Anything that you practice and that you do well is going to be perfected. You're going to hone your skills, you're going to sharpen your skills, and so that's what we're hoping for with all of these activities. So let's get into this one. Electricity is a powerful form of energy that helps us live modern, convenient lives. It powers lights, appliances, computers, and so much more. At its core, electricity is the movement of tiny particles called electrons. These electrons travel through conductors like metal wires, creating what we call an electric current. Most of the electricity we use comes from power stations. These stations use different sources of energy like coal, natural gas, wind, or solar power to generate electricity. Once created, the electricity travels through long wires and transformers until it reaches homes, schools, and businesses. This process must be carefully regulated to keep the supply stable and safe. Electricity flows through something called a circuit. When a circuit is complete or closed, electricity moves through it, turning on a device like a lamp or a fan. If the circuit is open, the electricity stops flowing and the device shuts or turns off. Electricity can be dangerous if it is not handled properly. That's why wires are covered with special materials called insulation, which protect us from electric shocks. Electricity is an essential part of our everyday lives. From powering hospitals to charging our phones, it helps our world run smoothly. As technology continues to grow, understanding electricity becomes even more relevant and important. So, this week I would recommend that students be comfortable spelling words such as electricity, convenient, electrons, even things simple as simple as conductors and wires, stations. These are all words that students should be comfortable with in terms of spelling. Circuit is another word, device is another. These are words which can, if the student is not committing these words to memory, students can end up having a lot of trouble spelling these very simple words, as you all saw in our mandatory homework for class 5 this week, well, class 6. So let's get into the questions. Question 1, what materials do electrons travel through to create an electric current? So this is a literal type question. The answer for this question can be found directly in the passage. Even more specifically, it can be found in paragraph 1. And so the answer to this question is electrons travel through conductors such as metal wires to create an electric current. Question 2, why do you think power stations use different energy sources like wind or solar? So we may have seen pictures of wind turbines, windmills, solar panels in different parts of the Caribbean and different parts of the world. Why do you think those sources of energy are used? Well, Power stations may use different sources of energy like these, wind or solar, because those are renewable sources of energy. In other words, they are available all the time. If you live in Trinidad and Tobago or any part of the Caribbean, the sun is shining at the very least 80% of the time during the day. And even if we have a little bit of cloud cover, there's still a lot of sunlight. We are in a very tropical, bright, sunny environment, and so this source of energy is renewable. It is also environmentally friendly, and it will help reduce our dependence on fossil fuels if we rely on renewable sources of energy like wind and solar as well. Question 3. What might happen if a circuit is always closed and never turned off? Well, if we go back to the passage explained to us clearly what happens when the circuit is closed. Can you find that portion of the passage? We're looking at paragraph 3, starting from around line 10. It says, electricity flows through something called a circuit. When a circuit is complete or closed, electricity moves through it, turning on a device like a lamp or a fan. If the circuit is open, the electricity stops flowing and the device turns off or shuts off. So, what might happen if a circuit is always closed? That means that the electricity is always flowing and never turned off. Well, if a circuit is always closed, electricity would constantly flow. And yes, that's a picture of a circuit on the screen there. And this can cause wastage of energy. It can cause devices to overheat, which can then lead to fires or damage to electrical equipment. So although there are some types of appliances that we have in our homes that are generally always plugged in, and the electricity is always available, there are some types of devices which we would not want to always have plugged in, because overheating of those appliances or those devices can lead to significant damage to the devices or even damage to other valuable items in our homes. So let's go to question 4. Why is it important to understand how electricity works as technology continues to expand? If it's one thing we know is important to all of our technological advancements and all of the new inventions and new things that we're learning about every single day, is that those things don't work without electricity. So that technology is becoming more advanced, and as it becomes more advanced and widely used, understanding electricity, which is almost like the foundation of technology, helps us to use those devices safely, may help us to understand and troubleshoot or solve problems, and it may even help us to create or repair different systems. When we understand how something works, we can understand how to solve problems that arise or even create new inventions because of our understanding. Question 5. Do you think insulation is the most important safety feature in electrical systems? Why or why not? I said to you in our extra mile activity for class 5, the one we called After the Storm, that this is an evaluative type question, and what they're expecting is for you to tell them why or why not. So that means that there's no one right answer to this question. However, your answer must be logical, and as far as possible, if you can find some evidence for your answer in the passage, that would be best. So there are 2 possible answers for this question. The most plausible answer for most students would be yes. Insulation is one of the most important safety features because it prevents electric shocks and it keeps the current inside the wires. That's an important role that insulation is playing, but it's not the only safety feature. Another safety feature that may not have been mentioned in the passage would be a circuit breaker or grounding, which are also important for overall protection. But it's completely fine, completely acceptable for you to have all said yes, insulation is one of the most important safety features. Let's go to question 6. Explain what is meant by the following words. One word was regulated, the other was essential, and the third was relevant. Regulated means managed or controlled. Managed or controlled. Essential means critical or vital, and relevant means important. So if we go back to the passage and we see that in line What line is that? 5, 6, 7, 8. We see the word regulated is in bold. This process must be carefully regulated. Can replace that with this process must be carefully managed, or this process must be carefully controlled to keep the supply stable and safe. Then we go down to the last paragraph where we have electricity is an essential part of our everyday lives. No one can deny that electricity is a critical or vital part of our everyday lives. And in the final line, as technology continues to grow, understanding electricity becomes even more relevant, even more useful, even more critical, important. And those are other words that we can use as well. In the second to last line, we have the word smoothly. The phrase says, it, that is electricity, helps our world run smoothly. Another way that we could have said smoothly would be, electricity helps our world run easily and comfortably. Those are two words that we can use to replace the word smoothly as asked in question 7. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of feedback for our Extra Mile activity. I hope this was helpful to you. I noticed that our subscriber count is growing. I want to welcome those of you who have joined. My name is Mrs. Crosby. Do share this video with someone who you think may find it helpful. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all in class.